And the meeting is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Donna from Oregon, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. During the June 10th roundtable, they talked about something I feel very strongly about, which is loyalty. So often there isn't any in marriages to this country or anything else. Some of the people who run this country would watch it go under as it meant more power or more money for them. They have no loyalty to it. Of course, disloyalty to God is the very worst kind of disloyalty. People try everything else to solve their problems, and as a last resort, they turn to God. Of course, they should start with God, but the whole world teaches everyone from birth that the other ways are better. That's being disloyal. I believe the members of the Plainfield Christian Science Church do turn to God first, and now I know there are many amazing healings all the time. I'm so grateful to be a member of a church that teaches us how to do that. Our practitioners are wonderful and help us when we can't help ourselves. Most of all, I'm grateful to God who made us a perfect world to live in and gave us the ability to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I am very grateful for this church and the way that God has gathered people that can work together so well here. In my previous work environments, there always seemed to be this division between those who were there to work and others who just wanted to do as little as possible. I found it very demoralizing to be in those situations. At this church, however, it is so different. These members put their all into this God-directed work constantly. This is the reason why each lesson, publication, discussion, and reading are always a blessing. It is incredibly inspiring to me each day to be a part of this mission and to witness the way all these individual demonstrations come together for this wonderful whole. I'm grateful to God for Christian Science, for this church, for this work, and for the practitioner support that keeps me on track each day. Thank you. And also, I have a testimony from Diana in Berlin and Vienna.
Hello, this is Diana from Berlin and Vienna. I have a lot to be grateful for this week, but tonight I would like to express my gratitude for the roundtable discussion of June 24th, this last Sunday, called In Defense of Mary Baker Eddy. I've listened to that at least 3 times, and it's really helping me to clarify, first to understand, and then clarify some things that had been very confusing. So I want to thank all of you for that very instructive roundtable. I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Dale from Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for those wonderful readings on the leaven of truth. I'm very grateful for the protective care of our Father, Mother, God. A couple of months ago, I experienced a bad tumbling fall down a full flight of bare wood stairs. When I came to rest at the bottom with my eyes closed, I loudly declared, God good, God good, God good. Life, truth, and love fill this place and nothing else. Evil cannot come nigh my dwelling. Everlasting arms of love are beneath, around, above. And I prayed with the 91st Psalm. I was then very grateful to be able to freely go straight to do my individual prayer watch. As it was early in the morning, I then called my Plainfield practitioner, leaving a message of what had happened, and asked for support. The practitioner called back and said the angels of his presence were indeed holding me up and protecting me. My husband told me later that when he helped me to my feet, he was relieved to see that I was not in pain or incapacitated. I can honestly say that my only fear at the bottom of the stairs was that the only clothes I had brought to go to church that day, as we were visiting from out of state, was a dress, stockings, and high heels. The thought came to me that in Mrs. Eddy's household, students would be asked to do things which seemed impossible to human sense. They had to be demonstrated. And so here was my opportunity. The day turned out to be an absolute joy. I was able to freely do everything I had to do, to bear witness to the truth, and to glorify God. And this protective care and healing has remained permanent. I can't express enough gratitude for what is taught in this church of the allness of God and nothing else, and for my practitioner, who is faithful and dedicated, and who was prayerfully watching and working on that day to see the unfolding of good.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you very much for the readings tonight. Thank you for the music. Tonight I would like to express my gratitude for practitioner support at Plainfield. The other day I received a rebuke from my practitioner, and it has continued to be a blessing because it alerted me to a drifting in my thought that had led to a willfulness that was driving my actions rather than listening to God. I am also grateful for the literature and our classes at this church that clarify the purpose and need for correction. One of the books on our website, titled Mary Baker Eddy, Her Spiritual Footsteps, by Gilbert Carpenter, in chapter 67, he lived with and worked with Mrs. Eddy for a year in her household, and he wrote, quote, Mrs. Eddy would stand for no nonsense when unhandled errors were lurking in the mental home of the student. She demanded that we tell the truth about the lie, but when we did, to realize that it was a lie, end quote. It seems natural to want to avoid correction, but I know I needed help changing the direction of my thinking and the path that it was taking me. I was also reminded to make sure that I was taking account of my day, to square my account with God. This practice is helping me avoid the buildup of negative feelings, a mental house cleaning, and to keep my slate clean so I can be useful to God. And I just want to express my gratitude to Mrs. Eddy, to Jesus, and to this church. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda from Missouri, go ahead.
Thank you. I recently accompanied someone in my family on a trip they needed to make. And as always, I felt like my practitioner was there every step of the way. This trip required rather long days of everyone attending this conference. And towards the end of it, many seemed to be dealing with a lot of fatigue and also some stress and frustration because some felt there was not sufficient time to accomplish everything. And so the workload appeared a bit overwhelming. And then to compound that, the information that was needed by some people to finish this work also seemed to be lacking. And the help did not seem to be evenly distributed amongst everyone. And so I was very thankful that in my role on this trip, I had a good amount of time to be quiet and to pray. And for this situation, I worked with some things my practitioner had previously given me before when I myself was feeling overwhelmed with work or things that needed to be done in a tight period of time. And a helpful statement is from John, which is, "The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works." And I was reminded that this sense of frantic exasperation certainly was not right. It was not from God, and that whatever truly needed to be done and was right to be done could and would be
accomplished timely and competently, and that this applied to everybody and not just one or two people. And the answer to this particular problem came in such a practical and perfect and unforeseen way at the time that God's hand directing this was very clear to me. And towards the end of one day, I was called over by someone who mentioned that she had been very frustrated with the way the week had gone, but that she was fortunate to have her brother with her for the trip who had traveled with her for moral support. And then she explained that her brother just so happened to be an expert in the exact field that the additional information was needed from, and that when she had mentioned the problem that others had been having to him, he said that he wanted to help. And then we learned they'd actually been looking for us the night before. And so that evening, just a few hours before some of this work was due, this man came over and provided the necessary information, including a sample of what was needed to complete the remaining portion of this project. And it was completed in the requisite time period and to a satisfactory caliber. And this man has even offered to continue to serve as a resource for ongoing information. And in speaking to his sister about how grateful I was for them and for him, she mentioned that he felt it was his Christian duty to help others and that he genuinely enjoyed being able to do so. When I told my practitioner about all of this, she reminded me that we can never doubt God's ever-presence and his plan unfolding everywhere. And I'm very grateful for this example and also for the practitioner support. And of course to Mrs. Eddy, our leader, for fulfilling her God-appointed duty of discovering Christian Science and sharing it with all of us. Thank you for tonight's service, to all those supporting it, and for the broadcast and the music, the testimonies so far, and to Gary for the readings. Good night.
Thank you. Colleen from Massachusetts, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for the readings and the music tonight. The theme, the leaven of truth. In this week's watching point, number 399, Mrs. Eddy says, quote, "In human love, you seek someone to love. In divine love, you seek to love." This has been so helpful to me as it's opened wide my heart, and I rely on God alone for every thought and action, and I don't second-guess myself. God guiding me relieves me of tension and worry and fear about whatever anyone might think, which they're not thinking anything, or even what I'm saying, because it's God-directed, and my actions are to please God alone. This has helped to disentangle my thoughts and just do from God's perspective and live from love's standpoint. I'm also realizing that mortal man is false. It's a false view. I'm not accepting this. It's not the truth about us. God is showing me to seek and find his beautiful qualities in every single man, woman, and child, even when they seem hidden. And when I do this, I get a beautiful view of everyone, and I see the good ideas, which makes up this individual. This is healing me so that I see others as I should, the way God made them in his image and likeness, his precious children. Thank you for tonight.
Thank you. Craig.
Thank you for those really inspiring and enlightening readings. The three measures of meal. We will be seeing the world and all of our experience, yes, being changed and uplifted. For prayers and study, we're part of that. And thanks for the wonderful music. And also, I want to give gratitude for a couple of things. One is, one of the readings a couple weeks ago was on courage. And it meant a lot to me, because at the time, I was making progress, but I felt a little very comfortable. And the situation had happened where I could just let it go, because it made courage to speak up, which was the right thing to do, might cause some animosity among some other people that they really weren't looking for the truth at the time, but in the end it would bless them. But when I heard that reading, I said, I have to have the courage to speak up, because the result of not speaking up is far worse than the temporary peace of just being quiet. And so that reading, I spoke up, as happened to with my sister-in-law, and I really blessed her and gave her what instruction that she needed to do to go forward, some things in her life. And I really felt good about myself then, and I had greater peace because of those readings. And I love what Mrs. Eddy has given us, day-by-day instruction to daily prayer and alertness to duty, to keep us walking forward and doing the right thing, being able to step up. And in Beatitudes it says, what good is the salt if it's lost its savor? And that's a real slap in the face for anybody just walking around and thinking there's something and they don't do anything, because they're just a weakling and not enough backbone to stand when needs to be stood. So so much is given here, and I also thank my practitioner, who has a very great support. I'm just seeing abundance coming to myself and my family, where I didn't see it before. And a great peace of mind and body. I think it's, I pretty much got true happiness here now, thanks to our church and Mary Baker Eddy and the support of our practitioners. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is Bruce. I wanted to say how thankful I am for the lesson this week. I was reading the responsive reading, and I got to the part where Jesus said, "How much more will your heavenly Father give the Holy Ghost to them that ask for it?" And I gotta say how encouraging this must be for anyone who reads it. I had an experience that was just like this. This was a number of years ago. There was one night when I was up in a great deal of pain, didn't know what to do. I was feeling really not well at all. And it was so much so that I even found it hard to think until after walking around for a while, I just said, "God, you tell me what's needed here." And all of a sudden, these thoughts came that were very strong and forceful about how omnipotent God is, and that he is everywhere, and his omnipotence applies to like everyone everywhere. And this thing of this pain is an imposition. Nothing can control me or anyone else but the power of God. And there were more ideas like this that just came. And the more it wasn't me thinking them. God was talking to me. As this conversation went along, the pain just melted away, disappeared. And not only did I have a sense of peace, but I had a very strong conviction that God was the only power ruling here with me and with everybody else everywhere. And I must say that God did give me his Holy Spirit that night, for which I'm very thankful. And again, this statement from Jesus, how encouraging this must be for everyone who reads it, because as it says in Science and Health, God, who is love, is impartial and universal in his adaptations and bestowals. So thank you, Father. Thank you. Royce from Texas, go ahead.
Thank you for the beautiful service tonight. I would just like to make a comment on one thing about the parable of the leaven. Quoting from Mrs. Eddy, did not this parable point a moral with a prophecy, foretelling the second appearing in the flesh of the Christ truth, hidden in sacred secrecy from the visible world? It doesn't say to the flesh of the Christ truth, but the second appearing in the flesh of the Christ truth. Thank you for this beautiful, beautiful service.
Thank you. Chardell.
Good evening. The readings are wonderful, thank you. And our music. I would like to offer my thankfulness to God, my patient and loving practitioner, and to the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, where I am learning about Christ's Christianity as taught by Mary Baker Eddy. I have been praying and pondering the concept of stillness. A friend of our church called Parthen said, in part, quote, "Stillness means to remain in the presence of God, to stand on His word without wavering, without giving way to what the physical senses may or may not be telling me," end quote. Another short piece I work with is titled Stand. It was found in a book with no author attached. It talks about 3 steps of standing without wavering. Some quotes are here. Quote, "Just stand still and know that I am God." That's from the Bible. And then expect the word to heal instantly. Hold fast. Let the Christ rise in you. Practice peace. Speak peace to the turmoil within. And Jesus said, quote, "My presence I give unto you," end quote. The next step is possession. Mrs. Eddy said, quote, "Giving all men, having all that God gives." Let me read that again. Quote, "God giving all, men having all that God gives," end quote. And then the writer ends with this, "I believe that this possession is what God gives us, and He gives all, in the step to the understanding of dominion of that which gives us what seems to be lacking," end quote. Thank you.
Thank you. Fairley from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be a member of the Plainfield Church. Thank you for the wonderful readings, very interesting readings on the leaven of truth. And I'm very grateful for everything I'm learning in the Bible studies and the round tables, all the literature about early workers in the Christian Science Church. And I'm beginning to understand in a way that I haven't before that I'm spiritual and not material. It's just become clearer to me. I know in Mrs. Eddy's, in Science and Health, Mrs. Eddy says the manifestation of God through mortals is as light passing through the window pane. The light and the glass never mingle, but as matter, the glass is less opaque than the wall. The mortal mind through which truth appears most vividly is that one which has lost much materiality, much error, in order to become a better transparency for truth. And I'm beginning to myself to understand more clearly that we are spiritual. And I used to just say when I had a pain, I would say there's no truth in pain and no pain in truth and no truth in pain. But I didn't really know what I meant. I didn't know really what I meant. But I've come to understand and to realize that I am spiritual. And therefore, there's no pain because I'm spiritual. And so this realization has just come on me recently. And I think it's just because I'm so fortunate to be a member of this church that gradually one comes to understand more and more as one proceeds in this science. Thank you very much for this service tonight and all the testimonies.
Thank you. Gary.
I don't think I could ever be grateful enough to Mary Baker Eddy for discovering this science and then having the courage to give it to mankind in the face of huge, huge obstacles. Since coming to this church, and with the help of Christian Science practitioners here, I've been healed of many things: the flu, bursitis, Lyme disease, colds, and many other illnesses. And I've also been helped through business problems, family problems, and character issues. And with each healing, I've grown closer to God, and I've gained a better sense that there are divine laws that we can always count on. And that's given me a sense of security that I have never known before and could not ever know without it. Mrs. Eddy wrote that we should trust in truth and have no other trusts. And I'm grateful to the practitioners in this church that have helped me over the years to trust more in God and have no other trusts. And that's been quite a change in my life, and one that I'm just very, very grateful for. Christian Science has been a firm foundation for my life, and I just can't be grateful enough to Mrs. Eddy for giving it to us. So good to be here tonight.
Thank you. Carol.
A few days ago, I had the TV on and my two granddaughters were there, and a commercial came on about some kind of a disease, and one of the granddaughters said to the other one, "Do you think I have that?" And right away, in my sweet little way, I said, "Impossible!" And and they looked a little surprised, and the one said, "Well, what if I really do have it?" I said, "Impossible!" And then I was able to tell them the story that we had been told here a long time ago, that a pharmaceutical executive was told someone that in order to sell their drugs and their medicines, they have to first sell the disease. They have to make people feel that they need this thing, and then they're going to get hooked on the medicine. And when I told them about it, they just looked so surprised. And I said, well, it just makes sense, doesn't it? Now, God never sent this to you. God never gave you these diseases or gave anyone these diseases. There's no reason for anyone to have it. It's just being planted in your thought. And you're either going to accept it or you're going to reject it. So anytime you see any commercials like that, just shout out, "Impossible." And they were very impressed. And I know that they've been doing it because their mom told me they have. So I just am so grateful for all that we have learned here and how practical. We get in there first with the impossible, and then you don't get any bad things. You're protected. You've already cast it out. And I just am so very grateful to God for this church, and so grateful for Mrs. Eddy and all that she has given us. I'm so appreciative of all she has done for us. And thank you very much for the readings.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for all the testimonies tonight, and Gary for the beautiful readings on the leavening of truth. I pray that more and more I will trust that this leavening is going on throughout the thought of all mankind, and is awakening to the truth that we are all of one Father. This truth is so important for mankind, and it deserves all our prayers, since the lie that we are different is the source of so many difficulties and most of our ills. Mrs. Eddy, thank her so much for her instruction on page 340 of Science and Health. She says that one infinite God good unifies men and nations, constitutes the brotherhood of man, ends wars, fulfills the scripture, love thy neighbor as thyself, annihilates pagan and Christian idolatry, whatever is wrong in social, civil, criminal, political, and religious codes, equalizes the sexes, annuls the curse on man, and leaves nothing that can sin, suffer, be punished, or destroyed. I'm just so grateful for Mrs. Eddy, all that she suffered to give the truth that will heal mankind of all its ills. I thank her. I thank God for giving her the truth to give to mankind, and I pray that we're all here doing our best so that the thought of mankind will be awakened to the truth that, yes, we are all of one Father. Thank you for the service tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
Okay, I have some things to read tonight. First from Vermont. Dear friends, as spring turns into summer, the beautiful expressions in nature of God's love for us abound. The love that is expressed by the members of the Plainfield Church also abounds. It is palpably felt when we attend church over the internet. How can we thank you enough? Where else could we go if the Plainfield Church were not there? Enclosed is our contribution to help this wonderful outreach that circles the globe. And then, this is from California. Dear friends, thank you so much for sharing the letter from a member who donated money she'd saved for a fence that couldn't be built due to a city ordinance. While thinking about that inspiring letter, I remembered I had some money tucked aside for a rainy day. Well, what better use than for a new roof for the church? I love that this church has changed my life in so many ways, and others as well. Thank you so much for all that you do, and much love to all. And then this is just a couple things from our church website bulletin board. There were many things on there, but I can't read them all. So anyway, one is from Virginia. I honestly cannot express enough gratitude for this wonderful church and all that it offers to anyone, anywhere, looking for the truth and learning how to use the truth in day-to-day challenges. Mortal mind is working overtime to disrupt your thinking, and it loves to suck you in its mesmeric picture. But we are taught how to handle these suggestions immediately and see them for what they really are. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And once you handle this, it returns to its nothingness. Mrs. Eddy says in Science and Health, quote, you command the situation if you understand that mortal existence is a state of self-deception and not the truth of being. Mortal mind is constantly producing on mortal body the results of false opinions, and it will continue to do so until mortal era is deprived of its imaginary powers by truth, which sweeps away the gossamer web of mortal illusion. End quote. Thank you, Plainfield, for all your pure teachings that Mrs. Eddy established, because these teachings help us in protecting ourselves as well as the world from the devil, the belief of the devil constantly knocking at mankind's door. With much gratitude. And then, Florida. Thank you for the inspiring newsletter. I enjoyed reading all the articles. The one on the spiritual journey of George Washington was excellent. I remember touring Mount Vernon in Alexandria, Virginia. George Washington's signature is etched on the wall at the visitor center. Above the inscription, it says, "To keep him first." These words were encouraging, and I took them to mean to keep God first. In his book, The Bulletproof of George Washington, David Barton writes, George Washington took part in the French and Indian War at the age of 23. In one particular battle, Washington's life hung in the balance for 2 hours. The general assigned Washington to take orders to the officers in the field. The Indian sharpshooters caused 63 of the 86 officers to become casualties. After the battle, George Washington recounted that 4 bullets went through his coat. The Indians shot 2 horses out from under him, but he escaped, although hurt companions fell on every side. 15 years later, the Indian chief in charge of that battle met Washington, and the chief recounted, "A power mightier than we shielded you, seeing you were under the special guardianship of the Great Spirit. We immediately ceased fire at you. The man who is the particular favorite of heaven, and who can never die in battle." And then she goes on to say, "I love this powerful testimony of angels in Psalm 91 and Mrs. Eddy's words, quote, 'Whatever is your duty to do, you can do it without harm to yourself,' end quote, in Science and Health. And also the article about the little hummingbirds in the newsletter called A Welcome House Guest was precious. 2 babies, boy, what a joy. Thanks to everyone who helped to deliver a summer uplift to my mailbox." We can certainly thank Jim, who writes a good part of that newsletter with such joy and such beautiful articles. They are always so uplifting. And we're so grateful for all of you who contribute in so many ways to make this church lively and interesting. I was reminded recently, I'd found this in the book Collectania by Mary Baker Eddy, and she says, "In treating a claim, never become discouraged if it reappears, but go to work and keep on treating it each time, and each time it will appear in a milder form until it will finally disappear forever." And I remember gratefully at one time having a problem, physical problem, and I thought I was done with it, and then a little bit later it would try to come back on me. And I found that quote, and I thought, boy, what encouragement, what love. And I followed those instructions. And if it seemed to come back again, I would say, okay, you're not going to fool me. You were never true in the first place. God never said it, and I don't have to have it. And I would go through some thoughts from Bicknell Young, in which he says, in every case, in every treatment, you handle 3 things. 1, that it had a material law. It comes under a material law. And to annul that and know that there is only the one law, God's law, of perfection and harmony and health. And then 2, cause, that there's some human cause that I had that problem. And no, because God is the only cause and creator, and his cause is pure and good. There can be no other cause from any other source. He's the one and only source and cause. And then finally, 3 is substance, and to know that, as was spoken tonight in one of the testimonies, that our substance is spiritual. We are not in matter. And if we are spiritual, then how can anything pin itself on us that's not of God? It's impossible. And as I would treat myself in that way, it would get less and less, and it did disappear forever. And in Science and Health, Mrs. Eddy says on page 248, "Let unselfishness, goodness, mercy, justice, health, holiness, love, the kingdom of heaven reign within us, and sin, disease, and death will diminish until they finally disappear." This has certainly been my experience. And when I focus on these qualities and think about mercy and justice and love and the kingdom of heaven reigning within me, and stop thinking about my problems, then the problems do diminish until they finally disappear. I'm so grateful for dear Mrs. Eddy, her textbook, the life of sacrifice that she lived to give us this wonderful way of life. I'm grateful for those beautiful readings tonight, which really is the prophecy of Mrs. Eddy. She is the woman with the leaven. And we're so grateful to have this truth to live and to love. And thank you all for your testimonies.
Thank you.